not thinking just about who can help us to set up the model, who can help us to sell now, but who can help us in the future when we need to raise another round or when we need to scale. I'm Avinash. I'm one of the two co-founders of Payflow. I'm of Indian origin, but I grew up in Spain, lived here most of my life. And before starting Payflow, I studied engineering at the University of Cambridge and MIT, which is actually where I met Benoit, as he'll let you know in a sec. And after that, I worked in management consulting for the Boston Consulting Group for a little more than 3 years. And then I started my own venture with Rocket Internet, the incubator from Berlin, before deciding to do something completely on my own with my good friend Benoit. And that's when we kicked off Payflow at the start of 2020.
So on my end, Benoit. So I'll also bring even more diversity to the co-founding team because I'm Brazilian French, and I'm and here basically in terms of background, you'll see here a lot of similarities that we have with Avi. So both engineers, both MIT grads, both in consulting. So on my end, I went to Bain to add a little bit of diversity to the team, but similar 3 years of solid management consulting experience. MBA at INSEAD, and then after Rocket Internet as well in another venture, and that brings us to Feb last year where we had the idea of building Payflow.
Okay, so give us a bit of flavor as to what Payflow does as a business.
Sure. So Payflow is an employee benefit. Basically, what we do is we sell it to companies, and they give access to their employees. So employees have access to a mobile app that will allow them to get access to their salary in real time. So instead of getting paid just once a month at the end of the month, they can now get paid fair and square. After working 5 days, they can get paid 5 days. After working 10 days, they can get paid 10 days. So they can stream their income as they want to.
Interesting. And how did you see a need for this service?
I think, these days, in terms of obviously with the current situation, we're children of COVID here, right? So we started Payflow at the very beginning of the pandemic. We were developing the MVP during that time, and we launched where it was the worst time ever to launch, right? So worst time ever economically speaking, but for our model, we see a lot of relevance. So we see a lot of obviously financial stress in employees in the markets we operate in, and basically this financial stress materializes in a loss of productivity for the companies, and basically the need was there, both in terms of employees and in terms of businesses, right? So businesses were facing a lot of change. So obviously at the very beginning, the whole situation was tough. It was tough selling to companies, but now we came into a lot more mature way of selling to companies, and we see that the fit is here.
Absolutely. And obviously with this product, there's a real mix of expertise on the sort of tech side, the finance side, but also just the real understanding of both the employee wants and what businesses are capable of in terms of payment. So what were the first steps in setting the business up?
I'd say that, you see, in terms of business idea, we always say that we had the idea a year ago, but this is not a new idea, right? Like, in fact, we looked at the idea when we were together at MIT and we were studying there, and this was about 8 years ago, right? So although a lot of people in the world today say that they invented the model, we don't have this arrogance. We basically know that this is a model that has been around for a while in the US. We're bringing it, we're scaling it in Europe and in Southern Europe, and we're doing it well, right? So the model is really targeting financial stress and financial difficulties of people. The first steps of building that, as you mentioned, is on the tech side. So from a product perspective, if you just look at the app, it looks like a pretty simplistic way, right? Like of getting access to your money. It's literally one screen or two screens where you select the amount and you get paid. It's instant. It's 100% secure and safe. So that's the deal we give to our end users, right? But most of the magic happens in the background, because in order to do that, you need to be able to know if a given employee, if James has been working today, and if you know, if you want to know that, then you basically need to be plugged into the HR software of the company that James worked for, right? And because if you don't have access to that information, then you cannot verify that this information is correct, basically, right? So the whole model basically is based on this verification, and this is where a lot of very complex technical integrations come from, and this is like the biggest challenge of this model.
There's clearly a lot of work that had to go into this immediately to even get to the point of proving the concept. So understandable that you raised funds fairly quickly after launching. So tell us a bit about that process. What were some of the challenges that you faced at that point, raising so early on in the company's life?
Yeah, it's exactly right, James. So getting that first MVP, being able to have something that worked for small companies was pretty quick. Took us less than a couple of months, but the model becomes very complex when you want to target enterprise clients. You need to have the highest standards of security, and as Benoit said, the magic payroll integrations that go on in the background, and that requires funding. So we decided to start fundraising quite soon in our lifetime. We founded Payflow in February, and we were able to fundraise our first 1.6 million by April. And as you probably guessed, that period from February to April is exactly when COVID was at its worst in Europe, right? When most countries were locked down. So that was our biggest challenge. For both of us, it was our first time in the Spanish entrepreneurial network. Like, we had both had ventures, but Benoit had been in Indonesia, I had been in Berlin, and our connections in the ecosystem were limited, right? So getting to connect with different investors, getting to connect with different angels, different VCs, all over video conference. This was the hardest part. I'd say the first month, February to March, was the tough part, where we got our feet in the ecosystem, and then the last 2 weeks of the fundraising were pretty quick. Once we had already talked to over 50 or 60 different potential investors, and the tickets just started to fly in towards the end of the process.
Amazing. And a lot of founders seem to struggle with not only gaining access to investors, but actually getting access to the right investors in terms of the types of company they're interested in, both in sector and in stage. So how did you narrow down the investors that you were talking to, and how did you get in front of them?
So, I mean, there are, I think that at seed level, you have a lot of investors, both from VC and business angels. So I do believe that it's a matter of effort, and it's a matter of basically first like first talking to as many investors as possible to try and understand who does what, because there is no magic database that tells you here are the 20 people you need to talk to, but you really need to get on a call with the first one, or typically you do it over coffee, but with no coffee shop, you have to do it over video conference. But understanding what companies they invest in, what industry, what ticket size, and then these people that you will basically understand that they are fit, they are a good fit for your business, they would generally co-invest and know other investors that have a similar investment thesis, right? So once you understand it, you're the more you have, the more you have, right? So it's really at the beginning, it's purely effort. It's a bit of a volume game until you find the right fit, and basically after it's navigating among those networks, and then at the end it happens really quickly. So it's really interesting, because the beginning is super tough, and then once it clicks, it's basically you're oversubscribed by 2x the amount that you want to raise, and then you need to select. And for us, the toughest part was at the end. Like, even tougher than at the beginning is like, who do we actually bring on board? Like, because we literally had so much. I mean, we had a lot more money that we needed, and we didn't want to raise more than this. So we were really, really selective in who we brought on board, right? So, and this is difficult, because you're you're promising and you're committing, and then after you cannot go back because you have your professional ethics. So you need to really manage this well, right? So you need to decrease ticket size or make sure that you have enough of the people that you need for the business to build, right? And then it kind of adapts, right? Like people are clear about it. Like an investor prefers to invest less, but to know that this other investor would come in because he would bring a lot more value. They would bring a lot more value together, right? So then after, it's a little bit of a game of matching the right profiles for your business. And but that's pretty much what we found in the fundraising.
Okay, this is interesting for a couple of points then. So obviously a great position to be in if you're overfunded effectively. So how did you make the decision as to who to bring on board?
We looked at who we were a little bit selfish, and we looked at who we thought would bring us more value, who would bring us more value, like who would be more hands-on and give us more advice. I think like both of us are quite humble in that sense that we know that we need help to do this. We need to surround ourselves by an amazing internal team, but also by an amazing team of investors that could help us. We looked at companies in their portfolio, and we asked them for feedback. How did this VC treat you? How much did this business angel actually help you? And also thinking a little bit further along the line. So not thinking just about who can help us to set up the model, who can help us to sell now, but who can help us in the future when we need to raise another round, or when we need to scale to another country, or when whatever the model was going to look like in 2 or 3 years.
And obviously that stakeholder management is so important. So particularly with the investors that you do bring on board, but I think as well for the ones you let down on the first round, maybe you would like their help further along the line. So how did you manage that relationship in terms of turning them down?
For sure, because you see, like I think that it's I mean, this was literally the very tough decisions we took for the business, because some of the investors, they were really great, and we didn't want to let them down. So I mean, we kept very good relationship with every single of them, and we hope to be able to welcome them like in the next round. That's the first thing. Or to be able, for instance, our business requires a lot of debt to operate, so we basically brought them on board on the debt side of the business that is a bit separated, so we can at least like still have a good relationship. And basically for us, you see, it was important to, you always need to take a bit of a trade-off between the brand and like the actual, you see, the actual value that it would bring to the business. We had, I mean, without saying any names, but we had two term sheets of amazing like VCs in terms of brand that were like a lot more impressive than a business angel, basically, from a yeah, like for further rounds, right? But we did not take those term sheets. Why? Because at this stage of the business, what we needed is people that would be able to open us 5, 10, 15 different companies in Spain, between 500 and 1,500 employees, that are manufacturing sleepers in the south of Spain. And a VC from the UK, from Europe, would not be able to open us those doors. They would be able to deploy a lot of capital at Series A. They would be able to help us a lot in recruiting, in strategy, in how to raise a better round further on. But at that stage, that's not what we needed. What we needed is people that just like help us push, help us get more business, right? And this is why the decision was so tough. But VCs, they also understand it, right? So it's at the end, we had a right mix with having Rocket Internet on board to bring like a large VC here, but also a large part of the round was family offices and business angels that were focusing 100% on bringing value to the business.
Makes sense. And obviously for a lot of founders, they themselves go through a bit of a role change in terms of, in the early days of the company when they're starting it up, pre-investment, they're very hands-on, they are more or less doing everything. And then investment sees them move to a more managerial role, managing the team, but finance and everything else. So how's it affected your roles within the business? Obviously all happening in such a short space of time.
So it definitely affected it. I mean, on day one, it was me and Benoit in Berlin in the Rocket Internet Tower, and we basically spent a month there, just the two of us, doing, as you said, everything ourselves. So we drew the first wireframes ourselves. We picked the name ourselves. We even basically drew the first logo and picked the first color schemes ourselves. So we were doing literally everything. And at that time, the way we used to organize is we basically had a Trello board or a to-do list with these are the 100 things we need to do to launch. And we split them half and said, like, okay, this one needs to be done by this date. This one needs to be done by that date. And we spent the first 2 months doing everything just to get launched, right? Today it looks very different. So today we have a team of around 10 employees or so, and another 10 interns or so, organized across 4 departments. So we have sales, operations, tech, and design. And then those different departments each have one person in charge of them. So as you said, we move into a much more managerial role. And the way we split our roles is it's maybe a little bit different to how other startups do it. So we don't give ourselves a title like COO or CFO or CTO or anything like this. But instead, what we do is we split the business by the current state of the business and the future. So I take care of basically anything that's going to happen in the next month, 2 months, 3 months. And Benoit spends all his time thinking about the future, trying to see like what is the company going to look like 6 months from now, a year from now. So what does that mean in terms of practical sense? That means that I work with the sales team. I work to get as many new clients as possible. I work with the operations team to get as many activations and new users as possible. I manage the day-to-day budget of this month. Whereas Benoit works a lot more with the product team, thinking long term of how are we going to make this product even better. He works on most of the fundraising stuff. How are we going to get more money in the bank when we need it? And he thinks more long term of the strategic view of where the company needs to go a year from now or 2 years from now.
Mm. And you mentioned the team there, which is obviously a vital part of the business now. And it is a key challenge for any business onboarding staff at the best of times, let alone during COVID and lockdown when it's all done virtually. So you have done that on a slightly larger scale where it's not just 1 or 2 employees, but everyone within the business has been onboarded virtually, I would assume. So what are your tips there, or any mistakes you made with that?
I think that you need to think about the size, because if at the very beginning, I would say when we were less than 5 in the team, it's very easy in a sense to make sure that everyone is on board, that everyone is committed, that everyone is there is no difference, like being face to face and being online. You can really make it happen online. When you go above 10, 12 people, like it starts to be more challenging, because especially you can't, I mean, you're a startup, right? So you cannot have only full-time employees, because otherwise your burn will go through the roof. So you need to rely a lot on freelancers, on interns, on people doing projects. So obviously you have a natural rotation, but because you're structuring the business this way, because you want to be cost efficient, and this can also like negatively or positively impact the rest of the business, right? So like you need to, I mean, I think both of us are pretty clear that it's very difficult to build a fully online company, like not being able to see your team and be with your team, and it's practically impossible. I know that some manage it, but I believe it's quite specific to tech heavy companies, because people in tech are already used to that model. If you want to find like a company that is doing B2B sales and that works like this, I think it's really hard to find, just because the business is hard. It's hard to cold call companies the whole day and get rejected 99% of the time and keep smiling if you're in your room and if there is no support from your coworkers, right? So you really need to have this human part. So we're trying as hard as we can to make it happen, although most of it is still online. So 1 or 2 days in the office for whoever can, a lot of online team fun, that we can do to create a strong team spirit, a lot of recognition on the team, like basically when people do something well, like to make it like to do a lot of public praising is really important. Like like all the HR problematics that you would have on a like a year and a half ago, you have them 3 or 4 times more harder to solve now. So you really need to double down on that. Like HR is the most important thing if you want your business to go well in those days.
Absolutely. And what are the goals then for the business this year?
So for us, the we're moving into this stage where we can scale what we already created, right? So we're moving into a fully growth stage. So our main intention is to conquer Spain. We want to get around 50,000 users by the end of 2021 in Spain. And then we would also like to launch a couple of other countries to start testing the waters there. Still to be decided exactly which ones they are. And then from the product point of view, we currently have the first feature that we mentioned, being able to stream your income. We also recently launched our second feature, Learn Flow, which allows users to go through an interactive e-learning course with different levels, so they can learn how to manage their personal finances better and become more in control of their own finances. We're soon going to release another one or two features during this year, and we think that those will help to get better engagement from the users we already have. And that's basically the main goals for this year. It also, the biggest challenge there is going to be in terms of scaling to enterprise clients. So we've got a very good reach over closing companies of 500 employees, 1,000 employees. We've got that completely cracked. Our next barrier is to be able to close companies of 5,000 employees, 10,000 employees, because they both from the sales point of view and from the activation point of view, it's a lot more complex in terms of legal. It's a lot more complex in terms of data security. And then also from the activation point of view, it's very easy to communicate that there's a new employee benefit in a restaurant with 200 employees, but it's much harder to communicate it in a call center with 10,000 employees, right? How do you get to everyone? How do you make sure everyone knows the benefits that downloading this app can have for them?
Yep, makes a lot of sense. And for those watching then, just to finish off, where can they learn more about both yourselves and the company?
So I think both of us are widely available on LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn because that's how we sell. So like that's the best way of contacting us. But also obviously and on our website like Payflow ES, for we're currently only operating in Spain. So like but we're rapidly expanding, or via email. So our name at payflow.es for both of us.